Recording now. And with that, our guest tonight is Alex Linzer. He's Deputy Director at the Board of Elections. I'm sure everyone here knows. And I've told Alex we'll turn it over to him pretty quickly. Asked him to give us an update on what's happening with voting rights regulations and some of the important things. One of the things I mentioned, what's going on with all the ballot language questions. I haven't heard anything more about that. But anyhow, whatever you think is important, Alex, go ahead and go for it. Thank you.
Well, thanks. Thank you for having me. There's a lot going on this year. It's a presidential year. We're expecting really high turnout, but there are also some new rules and new procedures, and some not so new rules that will be new to a lot of voters, because we know in Hamilton County during an off year, a busy election would be something like 40% turnout, but in presidential year, we expect to see 70 or 75% turnout. So there will be a lot of people who are voting for the first time since Ohio passed photo ID. So that's one of our biggest challenges. We've seen that one. It's a struggle for, I think, very young people, and it's a struggle for older folks who, maybe haven't driven in a while, and it can be hard for them to come up with the documents to get an ID together. So we've seen an increase in people voting provisionally and a decrease in the number of provisional ballots which are eligible to be counted, because if a voter lacks valid ID on election day or at the early vote center, they must return to the Board of Elections by the Saturday after election day and present valid photo ID in order for that to count. And very few voters actually follow through with that second step. In Hamilton County, we see roughly about 4% of our voters will be provisional. I'm expecting 415 to 430,000 voters. So that could be, back of the napkin math, we could be looking at as many as 20,000 provisional ballots. And of those, 1,000 or so might be no valid ID. So we are seeing an impact from that new law, and it's something we're watching. For what people need to know is there are 3 forms of acceptable ID. So that is a driver's license or a state issued ID, a passport, or a veteran's ID. The veteran's ID must be an ID issued by the federal government. It cannot be the veteran's ID that is issued by the county recorder's office. So it has to come from Department of Defense or the Department of Veterans Affairs in order for it to be valid for voting. So that's that photo ID law was one of the biggest changes in election law in the last 15 years in Ohio. But we've also got some other new things going on. There's been an extra emphasis from the Ohio Secretary of State on non-citizen voting. He is permitted by law to investigate whether or not non-citizens are on the voter rolls. And over the summer, the Secretary of State used 2 databases. One was the Ohio Bureau of Motor Vehicles database, and the other was the Federal SAVE database, to cross-check individuals against the voter rolls and determine whether or not they were citizens. Now, he found about 60 people registered to vote in Hamilton County who appeared on those databases. But I want to say that appearing on the database is not definitive proof that a person is not a citizen. So, for example, if a person has their non-citizen notation on their driver's license from the BMV, they may have since been naturalized as a citizen. And in fact, I know of several voters who appeared on the list where that was the case. But because their driver's license was not expired, they had not renewed their driver's license. So according to BMV records, they were non-citizens. So the Secretary of State actually ordered boards of elections to remove those citizens from the rolls. There was a process for them to submit proof of their registration, but not everybody responded to the notice that they got. So those voters, if you hear of or you know of a recently naturalized citizen who was removed from the rolls, they will be able to vote provisionally and their vote will count. But there needs to be some education in the communities where that's going to be likely, because people are going to need to know that, because they are just like somebody with invalid ID, they are going to have to appear at the Board of Elections and provide proof of their citizenship in order for their vote to count. Another new rule this year from the Secretary of State involves drop boxes. So earlier this summer, there was a lawsuit on behalf of people with disabilities. Under Ohio law, it has always been the case that a family member can return a ballot for another family member. This lawsuit said that that was a violation of equal protection and the Americans with Disabilities Act, because voters with disabilities who don't have a family member to return their ballot don't have an avenue for personal delivery. The court agreed with the plaintiffs in that case and ruled that a person with disabilities can designate an individual to return their ballot regardless of whether or not that person is a member of their family. So the Secretary of State, in response to that ruling, issued a directive which required boards of elections to close the drop box to basically only voters who are returning their own personal ballot. So there's a sign on our Dropbox now this year that says you can only return your own personal ballot in this Dropbox. If you are returning the ballot on behalf of anybody else, a family member or a person with disabilities, you have to fill out a form. And the form is, it's called a 12P. It is, you have to fill out the voter's name, your name, the date, and you have to sign it, and you are attesting that you have legal authority to return that person's ballot. So the way we're handling that here in Hamilton County, it's a struggle, because that means there really is no way for someone to return a ballot on behalf of somebody else outside of our regular business hours. But while we are open, we have set up a drive-through. So we have bipartisan teams of election officials standing at a canopy, and we have a part of the parking lot across the street set off with cones, and there are signs indicating that that's the ballot drop-off lane. So people can drive up. We're standing there with clipboards. They can fill out the attestation form and drop their ballot and move along. So we did that for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think it will really help with traffic flow around our building. And number two, that means that voters who are returning the ballot on behalf of somebody else don't have to park, walk inside to our office in order to fill out that 12P form, which would have been, logistically, that would have been challenging. We're already dealing with really high numbers of people coming to our office for early voting. So adding another thing for, people to have to park and walk in, it just would have created more congestion and been a big problem. So, so far that's gone relatively smoothly. We've been open for 2 days of early voting, and we haven't gotten a ton of vote by mail ballots returned yet because they were just mailed on Tuesday, but we're seeing that process seems to be working pretty well. So that's that's the new stuff. Now there are the sort of standard things that I think everybody's interested in. We opened the early vote center on Tuesday. That was the first day of early voting. We are open 8 to 5 every day this week. We'll be open 8 to 5 every day next week. After that, we stay open till 6, and then the following week we stay open till 7:30. For a full listing of the early vote center hours, I encourage anybody to go to our website, which is votehamiltoncountyohio.gov, because they do vary. But generally speaking, the closer we get to the election day, the later we are open for early voting. First 2 days of early voting have been robust. In 2020, on the first day of early voting, we saw 3,100 voters. And notably on that day, there was about a 45-minute line for the whole day. Yesterday, on the first day of early voting in 2024, we saw 3,600 voters, and there was no line. So the folks working outside and working inside are working really well to make sure traffic is flowing, making sure people are checked in quickly, and the building is running very well right now. It is very quick. If you come to early vote, I doubt you will wait more than 10 minutes. It's pretty much you walk in, you get checked in, and you get your ballot right away. So that's going really well, and we've seen both days turnout has surpassed the same day in 2020. So early voting continues to become more popular and is looking like we're going to see a pretty high turnout in the early vote center this year. Now, with regard to vote by mail, the story is a little different. In 2020, we were dealing with a pandemic. Vote by mail became extremely popular for, I think, obvious reasons. We saw a record 170,000 people vote by mail in Hamilton County in 2020. We're not going to be anywhere close to that this year. We've already seen about 70,000 people, though, request their vote by mail ballots. And that's right around the same amount that we saw at this point in 2016. So in 2016, we had 87,000 vote by mail ballots. So we're expecting somewhere around 90,000 vote by mail ballots in this election. But there is still time. People can request their vote by mail ballots up until the Tuesday before Election Day. That is October 29th. And we will be open until 8:30 that day. We do have to receive the application by that day. It's not the postmarked deadline. We have to receive it by the Tuesday before Election Day in order to get you a vote by mail ballot. We are continuing to process them. We mailed out of those 70,000, we mailed out 61,000 on Tuesday. The rest of them got mailed out today. And now we're in the process of every day we process what applications we receive and we mail them out the next day. So if we receive your application on a Tuesday, we'll process it that day, and the next day it will go out in the mail. With regard to early voting, the last day to postmark it is Monday before Election Day, so November 4th. It must be postmarked in order to count. And even if it is postmarked by November 4th, it must arrive at the Board of Elections by the Saturday after Election Day. So even if the voter postmarks it on the right time, if it doesn't get to the board office until after that Saturday, we cannot count the ballot. That's also a part of the same law that brought us photo ID. It shortened the time that boards of elections could receive ballots. I always tell people, if you are voting by mail and you're getting into that last weekend, it is probably a better bet to bring your ballot to the Board of Elections and use the drop box or use our drive-through drop-off, because you just don't know what's going to happen with the mail. And the good news about that is you can actually drop your ballot off up until the close of polls on Election Day. So 7:30 on November 5th, you can drop your ballot off in person and it will be counted on that day. As far as the third way to vote, which is in person at your polling location, we have 296 polling locations ready for November 5th. Over the summer, we did an ADA assessment to make sure all of those polling locations comply with the Americans with Disabilities Act. There's been we've lost a few. We used to be at 305. We've had to do some consolidation. And it's just little things like, the Sims Township Library was under construction, so we had to move it somewhere else. We lost a few churches that were sold, and the new owners didn't want to be polling location, didn't want to own a polling location anymore. So, but for the most part, we try not to change polling locations, especially leading up to a presidential election. Next week, every voter in Hamilton County will receive a postcard in the mail. That postcard will let them know that there's an election on November 5th, where their polling location is, and it will have some other information about photo ID, just to make sure that they're ready when they decide to vote, no matter how they decide to cast their ballot. After Election Day, we will publish the first round of results at 7:30 p.m. That will be the early vote. Ohio, we're very lucky in Ohio. We have the ability to pre-process absentee applications. When you see those states that take a really long time to report their results, like 2 or 3 days after Election Day, those are states where they're not legally allowed to open absentee ballots until Election Day or shortly before. In Ohio, we can process absentee applications, or I'm sorry, absentee ballots up until, starting from the day that we mail them. So we will, at 7:30, we will tabulate the results from the early vote center and the vote by mail. Those will be the first results we release. And then we sort of go through the process of retrieving all of the information from the voting machines, which have to physically be returned to the Board of Elections. We've spent a lot of energy over the last 4 years trying to communicate with the public about those machines. There's been a lot of questions raised nationally, a lot of misinformation nationally about the machines. We've opened up our doors. We do behind the scenes tours of the Board of Elections. We've tried to be more aggressive on social media, getting out the word and showing people behind the scenes, and say, you don't have to take our word for it. You can come see yourself how these machines work. But a big thing about the machines is they're never connected to the internet. And so because they're not connected to the internet, we have to get them back home on Election Day in order to count the votes that are on them. So that process, it takes a little longer during a presidential year. Most years we're done by 11 or midnight. I think this year it'll probably be a little later, just because there are more voters, more stuff for the poll workers to clean up. Just take a little longer for that equipment to make it back to the mothership in order for us to count it. And then, the last thing I want to mention is the results that we publish on election night are unofficial results. That is a big misconception. The official count in Hamilton County will happen on November 20th. And that will be, after we've counted all provisional ballots and all late arriving absentee ballots. We will do our final canvass, and that will be the official result of the election. And that is a normal part of the process, right? So it is not abnormal for the results to shift a little bit from election night to the final canvass, because we're counting those ballots that are legally cast, but need a little extra time for us to process. So that's sort of my spiel. I find that there are a lot of questions about this type of stuff. So I thought I would try to be as brief as possible so I could get to your questions.
Okay, I'm going to ask the first question, Alex. And I'm asking this question because it's actually an issue described in Project 2025. And it has to do with curing mail-in ballots. It seems to be a big issue, had been a big issue in Pennsylvania specifically. But what is the process here in Ohio? If someone should turn in a mail-in ballot, it not be counted because there's misinformation or some question about it. Is there any process for curing a mail-in ballot?
Yeah, so in Ohio, we, if there is a problem on the ballot, so let's start with, when we get a ballot back, it needs to be in an ID envelope. That ID envelope has to have pretty much 5 pieces of information on it: the voter's name, address, birthday, an ID of some kind, and a signature. So we're pulling up the voter's record in our voter registration database, comparing those 5 data points, assuming they all match and the signature matches. We are going to queue that ballot to be open, scanned, and processed. If there is a mismatch on the signature, or a mismatch on the date of birth or the ID, or some issue with that, that voter will be sent a letter. And we do our best to get those letters out the same day we receive the ballot. So we tend to receive the ballots from the post office in the morning, sort of late morning, 10 or 11 o'clock. We run them through our process, and we can usually get those letters back out to the post office by the end of the day. Not only do we send the letter, but we also, if we have a phone number for the voter, we will call them. And they'll get a message that says there was a problem with your vote by mail ballot, and look out for this letter that's coming in the mail, because it's going to have instructions for how to cure it. Inside that letter will be a Secretary of State Form 11S, which will state what the issue was with the voter. So for example, if it was a signature mismatch or a missing signature, we actually see a fair amount of missing signatures, then there will be a spot on that form for them to give us a new signature, and they just need to return that 11S to the Board of Elections by the Saturday after Election Day. So if we get, when we get those forms back, we can then cure those ballots and we can count them. I haven't heard the Project 2025 element of that, but that's how it works in Ohio.
Okay. There's an issue of whether or not a what's the term you use? The provisional ballot, whether or not that can be used if someone has some information incorrect on a mail-in ballot.
Oh, that's a great point. And in fact, if you get an 11S form from us, the only way for your vote to count is to return the 11S. You cannot vote provisionally. Or, I mean, you could try, but that vote will not count. We cannot count a provisional ballot from a voter who submitted a vote by mail ballot. So if there is an issue with someone's ballot, they must cure it through the Form 11S process. They cannot go to the polls on election day and try to vote provisionally. Thanks for asking that. That's a good point.
Yeah, is there a time frame of when they receive the 11S? And let's say could they still receive that after election day and turn it in? You said up to November 4th, but what if they receive it after election day, November 3rd or something like that?
It's as long as we get it before the Saturday after election day. As long as we get it back, yeah.
All right.
So and just like the ballots, that can be returned in person too. We're open until 5 p.m. on that Saturday. So if somebody gets it late, they can return it in person.
Great. Hey, other questions? Anyone?
Dan?
Yes.
Bruce, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I have to jump to another event. I'm over the Rhine right now, but I just wanted to first of all say it is amazing how professional Alex and his entire team, both sides of the aisle, are. And I've been working there the last 2 days. I'm the Democratic lead. There's a Republican lead for the outside staff people who are managing the line, getting people parked properly, especially people with ADA, handicap stickers, etc. But it is amazing how professional those folks are. Number two, it's important for all of us to realize they're able to vote. They were voting 600 people an hour in 2020. Alex has explained that they have the capability of voting now up to 800 people an hour, which Alex believes makes Hamilton County's early voting site the fastest that is most number of people per hour can be voted there than any other early voting location, certainly in Ohio and perhaps in the country. It's amazing. And the
Right.
one thing that might be helpful for Alex to share, because it was helpful for me, is that if somebody applies to vote by mail and they get their ballot by mail at home, but they decide that instead they want to go to the Board of Elections to vote early, there's a procedure that Alex would be good, it'd be helpful, Alex, if you could explain. That is very simple, very foolproof, so that somebody could, if you already got the ballot in the mail to vote by mail, you could instead go to the Board of Elections and vote there, and that vote that you cast there will be counted. Correct, Alex?
Yeah, that's correct. And it's one of the reasons we were able to get the check-in, rate up at the early vote centers. We've done some work to simplify this process, but if somebody requests a vote by mail ballot, and they decide they want to vote in person, they can come to the early vote center and we will check them in, and they'll actually just get checked in like any other voter. It won't even, from the voter's perspective, nothing will happen. But it's pretty neat what happens behind the scenes, because as soon as we check in that voter, the iPads that we use to scan the voter's driver's license and check that they're registered and eligible to vote, it has a connection in our early vote center directly to our voter registration database. And so as soon as that voter is checked in, it puts a flag on the voter's record, which voids that vote by mail ballot. So even if the ballot is already in their home, once they've been checked in at the early vote center, that ballot can no longer be cast in the election. So even if somebody were to try to vote twice by returning the vote by mail ballot, it would not count, because the system would recognize that voter has already cast a ballot. But it all happens behind the scenes. And for the voter, they just simply check in like they normally would. And if they are kind enough to bring the ballot back, we will take it from them and we will destroy it. But like I said, even if they don't destroy it, it at that point, it's just a worthless piece of paper.
Can the
Great
same
job.
thing happen on election day?
Yeah, there's a different process on election day, because on election day, we don't have that live connection to our voter registration database, right? So we have no way of knowing on election day whether or not that voter has returned the vote by mail ballot, because it's just one of the security measures. Like I talked about, the machines aren't connected to the internet. So on election day, we will have that voter vote a provisional ballot, which will count as soon as we get it back to the Board of Elections and verify that they did not cast their vote by mail ballot. If we get a provisional ballot and a vote by mail ballot from the same voter, the vote by mail ballot is going to be the one that counts, and the provisional ballot will not be counted.
Okay, great. Any other questions?
I have a
Yes,
couple questions.
Claire.
Let me just, I have 2 or 3 questions, so maybe I'll just put them all out there. For the returning the mail-in ballot, is it 1 stamp or 2? On election night, where is the best place to visualize election results? Is it on the Board of Election website? Or is there some other place to get the fastest look at what things look like? The third question is, do you have any need for personnel at this point for election day?
Great.
And then the fourth question, sorry, was that drive-through thing. What are the hours and the days that you're doing that?
Gotcha. So, in order, the stamps to return your ballot in Hamilton County are $1.01. It is a thick packet of paper this year, so it's 2 forever stamps, or $1.01 stamp in metered postage. Sorry, $1.01 in metered postage. The best place to visualize results, I think our website is really good for this. If you go to our website on election day, and we post it on social media as well, but you can go in by race and you can pull up maps and see, like it will color code precincts. So then you can see like how candidates are faring in different parts of the county. And you can customize the report to show you the data that you want to see or only show you the races you're interested in. Where, you know, our results are only for Hamilton County though, of course.
Mhm.
So if you want to look at what's going on in the congressional races or the statewide races, you're going to need to go to the Secretary of State's website. But our website will be the fastest way to get accurate results on election night. I think the local news do a pretty decent job considering their resources, but I don't, you know, I just think in terms of getting the results as quickly as possible and having that cool map feature, I always liked looking at the maps. That because you can kind of see where the results have come in from and where we're still waiting for, you know, so that way you can kind of be your own sort of pundit and try to predict how the rest of the night's going to go. With regard to personnel, we have filled all of our Democratic poll worker positions. We are pretty much just recruiting Republicans to serve as poll workers at this point. Do have a few openings for some kind of specialized roles. Call them the truck supply workers or early pickup guards. And a truck supply worker is basically somebody who works the Saturday morning before election day and for about 3 hours on election night. And they are, on election day, they're delivering ballot bags to poll workers. That they go to a designated meeting place. The poll workers from that area all come during, you know, the morning hours and pick up their ballot bags. And then on election night, they're collecting the equipment that the poll workers bring back that we need in order to count the votes. And then they drive it back to the Board of Elections. So we have some openings for that. And the early pickup guard program is sort of a way we get results in a little faster because that process I described with getting the trucks back, that takes some time. So we have designated precincts throughout Hamilton County that we actually send an early pickup guard to go get the vote counting equipment and bring it back to the office. So we can usually get that equipment back, you know, 7:30 or 8 and start counting those votes so that we can start publishing results earlier in the night. Just a way to kind of keep the information flowing and you know, make sure people don't get bored, because if we are quiet for too long, people start to ask questions. And then I'm sorry, what was the fourth question?
It was about the hours
The
of the
drive-through. Yeah, so that is open whenever we are open for business, which is going to match our early voting hours exactly. So if you go to our website or you follow us on social media, we post the red, white, and blue chart as pretty often that has the whole calendar for the month. Generally for the next 2 weeks, it's going to be Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. But those hours will expand as we get closer and closer to election day.
Right. Thank you.
Very good. Other questions?
I have some. First, on the postage, I heard from somebody at the Board of Elections in the last few years that the Board of Elections will not send a ballot back because it doesn't have full postage. Is that accurate?
It is accurate. We
Okay.
don't advertise that because the post office
Right.
charges us for it.
Sure, I understand.
But
I just
Yeah.
wanted that verified.
Yeah.
That was good news. I was surprised to hear it in our current climate, but that's good news. Okay, about the non-citizen list and removal of, you said there were about 60 in Hamilton County that, and you knew that some of them had registered, had been naturalized, and so they were eligible to vote. do you think that's the case for all of these people? What I'm wondering is, were non-citizens registering to vote before they were naturalized in some cases? Does that actually happen?
Yeah, I mean, the honest answer is I just don't know. I know the data sources that the Secretary of State used to perform the audit. I know that at least one of those data sources can be out of date, right? Um, it is so rare that a non-citizen attempts to register or vote. And, I'm not going to say it doesn't ever happen because there are, there are lots of agencies in the government that will present you with a voter registration card when you are applying for their services, right? Disability services, anything from the Department of Job and Family Services, when you go to the BMV. Now, when they go to the BMV, they're not supposed to present non-citizens the option to vote, but, I, who knows that
But when
happens
you're
every time.
when
So I
you're
think a lot of,
when you're registering to vote, doesn't that require proof of citizenship?
it requires that you check a box that says you are a US citizen. It does
Okay.
require that. But in my experience dealing with immigrants in the voting system, whenever they attempt to vote, it is because of a misunderstanding of the rules. And as soon as they are told what the rules are, it's not coming from a place of trying to influence American elections. It's there are people who are here legally. In some countries, legal residents can cast ballots. It's just not the case in this country. But so they just don't know the rules. Or somebody handed them a voter registration card and they filled it out without really knowing
Sure.
what they were doing.
That makes sense.
We just don't, with regard to those 60 people, I just don't know. I know that at least 3 of them were able to provide proof of citizenship after the fact.
Okay, I have a question on drop boxes also. And I say that intentionally in the plural. Because it seems to me there are a whole bunch of drop boxes. They're called U.S. Postal Service mailboxes. And so is it illegal for someone to drop someone else's absentee ballot in a mailbox?
That is not clear in Ohio law. You could certainly argue that that is illegal. There's absolutely no way of knowing.
And it's certainly not
mailbox.
It's certainly not enforceable.
Correct. That's what we would have no way of knowing that. So.
And given that, it seems kind of hypocritical to have so much concern about the drop box outside the Board of Elections.
Yeah, the Dropbox, it's under 24/7 camera surveillance. It's got a lock in for a Democrat and a lock for a Republican. You need both parties to open it. It has a fire suppression system in there in case it gets too hot. It will automatically chemically eliminate a fire. It's an extremely safe way to return a ballot. And for whatever reason, it has become a victim of political gamesmanship when it comes to election administration. I honestly don't understand why. In other states, drop boxes are not controversial.
Well, I understand why. It's called voter suppression. It's pretty clear. It's pretty blatant. And one last thing. I know the voter suppressors are frequently heard to say, we want it to be easy to vote and hard to cheat. And I laugh when I hear that, because obviously they're doing the opposite. They're making it harder to vote, and that is a form of cheating. But I also think if we want to hold them to easy to vote and hard to cheat, which everybody should be able to agree on, I think it is incumbent on the government that is making it harder to vote or requiring voter ID. It should be incumbent on the government to make sure that everyone who is an eligible voter in the state of Ohio gets a voter ID, cost-free. There should be, I hesitate to call it affirmative action on the part of the government, but it should be required that they take steps to make sure that everybody has that voter ID without having it be a poll tax on those, on anyone, especially those who have difficulty getting a voter ID. But so I know that's not your lane to answer that, but I just wanted to express that opinion. If you're interested in fair elections and you really want to encourage people to vote and not discourage it, I think that would be a good thing for the government to do. And I have not ever heard anyone suggest that.
There,
I'm gonna
there
chime
are
in.
some states that have voter IDs that you can get, but yeah, it is, you're right, it's the Ohio legislature that would have to change that.
Let's go to
I-
April. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
just
April.
want to chime in to say, if you know someone who you talk to who realizes that they don't know where their driver's license is on election day, or the days right prior, getting a reprint only requires that you walk in with minimal documentation, and it's around $26.50. But if someone has let their driver's license expire because they are no longer driving, they can surrender their driver's license privileges and get a state ID for free. So the tax part of it is the effort of having to go to the BMV and go through that process of changing from a driver's license to a state ID, if that's the situation. But they are free. If you want a state ID instead of a driver's license, they are now free, for the reason that we can't then call it a tax. But to remind people, when you're telling people not to forget their photo ID, they also have to be not expired. So if someone has an October birthday, all of those Scorpios or whatever, whoever else that means, that's out there, have to make sure that they either renew their license to go in to vote, or they better scurry and get back after they vote and get back, what'd you say, through Saturday, Alex? They could
Yeah.
come and say, oh, here's my renewed one. But they should not give up if it's expired. They should go ahead and vote and then go get it renewed and then go prove that it's not expired, right? Am I saying the right advice?
Yeah, we actually have already had one voter do it. So we had a voter appear yesterday with an expired license, and he voted provisionally, and he was back in our office today with his new license, and he cured his provisional ballot. So, but not everybody, does the follow-up. And so, while we have time, we're really pressing to make sure everybody knows what they need to vote, because I'd rather they have it when they show up to vote so that they don't have to vote provisionally, because, you know, it's a pain. It's like you said, the time, the effort that you have to put into it.
I had a question about the folks from the immigrant community. So we know that we have some really strong advocates in the county. Nancy Sullivan comes to mind, who works with folks from different immigrant populations. Do you know if there's been an effort to let folks, you know, because with privacy issues, it's not like the Board of Elections can say, hey, help us find these 60 people. They may not have gotten this mail. They could have moved, or they could have whatever. But I just didn't know if you feel like that's been advertised well.
I don't know that it has, you know, it's a pretty small group of people that it's affecting, but I did, when this was in the news, two organizations reached out to me. Well, one was Compass and the other was the Clifton Mosque. So they both asked for the list. The list is a public record, and
Oh, it is.
anybody who
Okay.
wants it could get it.
Okay.
And so, you know, I think they were going to try to reach out to the people who were on that list and determine whether or not they were citizens, and if they were, try to help them restore their voting rights. But, you know, anybody who wanted to do that could make a records request for that list. And I would
Okay,
send it.
that's great to know. I always just feel like when they make things hard on you, sometimes the best revenge is just to come back and then say, oh, look, like, you know, 51 of them.
Right.
You know, cured this, and the other 9, you know, signed up unaware or whatever it is. But basically that the more people who fix it, then it helps dispel some of the you know, kind of like enhanced, let's say, alarm.
Right. Yeah, you know, Georgia just did a similar audit, didn't they? And they came up with 0 voters registered. I think the Ohio Secretary of State cast a bit of a wider net, right? And the downside of that is it definitely caught people who were eligible citizens and removed their registrations. So,
Other questions? Anyone?
Do you have
it?
any insight about the lawsuit that was filed? I know I'm an environmental chair with the NAACP of Cincinnati, and I know that the state NAACP and ACLU, and I'm not sure who else, filed a motion to change the Dropbox.
yeah, it was set for an expedited argument calendar, but you know, I don't have any particular insight into that. We will say, well, I can tell you this. Ohio law, House Bill 458 is the law that brought us the photo ID law I have described, also some changes to vote by mail. One of the things House Bill 458 did was enshrined the Dropbox in Ohio law. Previously, Ohio election law was completely silent on the issue of Dropboxes. This was part of why they became controversial, because some counties employed them and some counties did not. So under House Bill 458, it put into statute that each Board of Elections can have one Dropbox. It must be at an office controlled by the Board of Elections. But key, the statute says these are the people who are eligible to return a ballot on behalf of somebody else, and it lists the family members who are eligible to return a ballot. And then underneath that section, it says there are 3 ways for them to return it. One way is by mail, one way is putting it in the only secure Dropbox, and then the other way is personal delivery to your Board of Elections. So Ohio law would seem to permit family members to use the Dropbox. And I think the court is going to have to deal with that controversy in the lawsuit that's pending. And so, you know, it will not be the first time that we get a last minute court decision. We'll see what the Ohio Supreme Court does, whether or not it changes our procedures, but you know, we're for better or worse over the last 3 years, we've gotten a lot of curveballs from the legislature and the Ohio Supreme Court. And so we've gotten pretty good at adjusting on the fly.
I may be behind other people, but I don't recall anything regarding the ballot language being decided for issue 1. There was a court case being.
Yeah,
It's
that was decided.
Yeah.
The Supreme Court largely upheld the ballot language that the Secretary of State and the ballot board approved. They required a few additions, which were promptly voted on by the ballot board. And so the language that you see on the ballot is final and is pretty similar to what the Secretary originally proposed.
Mhm.
And boneless means with bones.
Is the amendment actually on the ballot as well?
So, no, it is not. The full text of the amendment will be posted in the polling locations, and it is posted at the Early Vote Center. It is a 4-foot by 6-foot poster because it's quite a lot of text. So in order to make it even close to legible, they had to print it on a 4-foot by 6-foot poster.
And if you
Um,
answer a 20-question quiz, you get a Juris of Law degree.
Yeah. Well, that's unfortunate about the ballot language, I would say. But we go with what we got, I guess.
So
Any other questions?
am I correct that the language actually says it backwards?
The language says that it creates an unelected commission that is directed to gerrymander the state.
So that's not good.
Right? It's not good for anyone who doesn't have someone talking to them about it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's dishonest. I mean, one thing to keep in mind, I went and voted yesterday. It literally takes up a whole page of your ballot for that ballot language. Nobody's going to read it.
But just the very beginning of it.
They won't. They won't.
Yeah. I feel like it's like the second
People
paragraph.
that know what it is are going to vote on it, and the people that don't won't even vote on it. Just like when you don't know which judge candidate you want to vote for.
That's why we all need to be getting those yard signs on issue 1.
Mhm.
Get them out there.
Issue 1 and the judges to enforce it. Yeah.
Right.
The opposition's yard signs are deceptive as well, and they have the same colors and look the same as the pro side.
Mhm. And I think they say end gerrymandering on
Yeah.
the oppositions
Stop.
as
One
well.
says stop gerrymandering.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In that
Yeah.
regard.
I
They're
just
trying
keep thinking of my version of the MAGA hat. I want to have a MOFA hat for Make Orwell Fiction Again.
You're
I want to
saying
say the names real quick in case we put this video out there a little quicker. Donnelly, Edwards, and Forbes.
Stewart.
Stewart.
Donnelly Stewart and
Stewart
Forbes.
and Forbes, correct. Yeah, thank you for correcting me there. Those are our candidates we want to vote for the Supreme Court, Ohio Supreme Court. So,
And vote yes on issue 1.
and vote yes on issue 1.
But
Yes.
Dan, I can't see the Mr. My
Dan
glass.
Zavon.
Yeah, that Dan. Did you say that the opposition to issue 1, their signs say end gerrymandering?
Stop gerrymandering, I think.
Mhm.
Yes.
fine, right?
Yeah, but it says no
says
on
vote
issue
no.
one. They're urging people to vote no on issue one, and they're
Yeah.
saying that will stop gerrymandering.
Oh, okay.
Even though the ballot language that they fought for says that you have to gerrymander. So there's just like so many contradictions going on.
Their argument, specious as it is that only the legislature, because people voted for them, should be able to draw districts. And so if we had an independent commission, that would be gerrymandering. That's obviously a load of crap, but that's what their argument is.
Right.
Yeah, that's a good point, Matt. Yeah.
Unfortunately. Okay, anything else tonight, folks? All right, thank you, everyone, and thank you very much, Alex.
Thank you.
Doing a
Thanks.
great job, sounds like, down there. Keep up the good work.
Yeah, it's going really well. So make sure you let people know there's no wait at the early vote center.
And there's a
Right.
bell.
A what?
Pardon me?
There's a bell you can ring. So when my daughter, the first time she was eligible to vote, because she's a December birthday, so she missed the November one. But the first time she was eligible to vote, she got to go vote for a levy for her school district. And I took her to the board office and she rang that bell for her first ever ballot cast
Okay.
at age 18 and 4.5 months.
All right,
I was
very
on-
good.
I was only in the room to vote on Tuesday for 10 minutes because it was so fast. And that was mostly because I was filling out my ballot so slowly. But while I was in the room for that 10 minutes, there were 4 bells.
Wow.
4 new voters in 10 minutes on the first day. And that, I mean, just in that short period of time. So that was very good. And Alex, it was just exceptionally smooth. I mean, it was just going
Good.
so fast.
Thank you.
Great.
Yeah, it's great to hear. They've been doing a great job in that building the last couple of days. So